as any. She's a consistent figure there. So I'd imagine there is this utter sense of devastation. I'd say that, there's going to be people piling outside Buckingham Palace already. We know that. And around Balmoral, where she passed today. So it's going to be a lot of people who are, I don't know that anybody's particularly stunned. She had been suffering from some very, very public illnesses following the death of her husband. So I think this is just the end of an era. And now we're going into a new era with a new king, her son, Charles. And we're going to be watching history unfold right now. She reigned 70 years, just had her Platinum Jubilee, and was a very beloved figure. She was not without controversy, but she was overall, I think, a very loved. They're very protective of her there. And I think this is going to be a lot of initial heartbreak, a lot of people coming to pay their respects to her, and the influence she's had undoubtedly over their lives at this point.
Sure, and Melissa, looks like we're going to get a press briefing in a few moments, and we'll, of course, keep you on until we have that. And then if you have time, of course, we'd love to have you on afterwards to get your reaction. You brought up the family. They were with the Queen, right, in these final moments. They had traveled to Scotland, I believe, is where she passed, to be with her.
Yes, she's in Balmoral, and she was surrounded by family. That was my first indication, I think, that I was like, we're in the beginning stages of the end of her reign, when they brought the family to her. And as I saw the BBC anchors change into black clothing, I had, I felt like I knew that it was coming. So it's going to be
sense of humor, an ability to put people at ease. And I think that one of the reasons that you do see this outpouring of affection, and not everyone in the UK is a monarchist, but my guess is going to be that even some of those, diehard Republicans who want the monarchy to end will find moments in the coming days to respect the life of this woman, because she really did stay out of the political fray and represented the nation as a whole and the heart of the nation as a whole. And it has had its very difficult times, and she has fought really hard to put all of that in the forefront, because I would assume, because she knows that it does mean a lot to so many people in the United Kingdom. It's a cultural sort of flag of patriotism that they represent, the love of the country, and that is separate in this entity and this institution than the political fray. So I think a lot of people appreciate that they can get to separate those things and love their country through this mechanism and keep it separate from the very rough political fray that lies beneath it.
Yeah, you mentioned London Bridge, which is the code name for what will unfold over the next 12 days or so, culminating with the Queen's funeral, which will probably be about 10 or 11 days from now, depending on when exactly they put this all into place. The first thing that will happen, Martha, I guess tomorrow, is that the Accession Council will meet and officially declare Charles to be the king. This will not be a coronation. That would come later. And then the Queen's remains, because she is at Balmoral Castle, will be transported either under Operation Unicorn by train through the countryside and down to Westminster Hall, where she will eventually lie in state for 3 days. Or if they don't take her by train, and there you see the British flag at half staff over Buckingham Palace, she would be transported by plane. But at any rate, she will end up at Westminster Hall, where 24 hours a day for 3 days, people will be allowed to come in and pay their respects to the Queen. And as we saw, when her mother, the Queen Mother, died several years ago, so many people from across the nation came to pay their respects. I can't imagine what that lying in state is going to be like for Queen Elizabeth.
It will be extraordinary, John. I can guarantee that. And I'm looking back at a piece that was very interesting that was written several years ago in The Guardian entitled "London Bridge is Down: The Secret Plan for the Days After the Queen's Death." And it details some of what we've gone through already today. There will be bulletins from the palace, but not many. And it goes in to say that it will be along the lines of the Queen is suffering from physical prostration, that they would characterize the fact that they believed that she was perhaps on the end of her journey, that it was coming to a close, so that people would start to prepare for this. On her passing, her eyes will be closed and Charles will be king. His siblings will kiss his hands. The first official to deal with the news will be, and this name has changed since this article was written, it is now Sir Edward Young, the Queen's private secretary. And he has stepped into that role. And he has a knighthood. He has been in this role. Planning this funeral is one of the biggest jobs of the Queen's secretary. And she has been intimately involved in selecting the music. So they already know whether or not she will be coming by train, since she was at Balmoral, or whether the body will be brought back to London by plane. But all of these details will be coming out in the coming hours. But all of this has been mapped out in great, great detail. But it's also a family story. And Charles is 73 years old. And today his mother passed and he became the King of England. He's the longest waiting in line prince in history. And there you see the statement at Buckingham Palace, where we've seen the births and the weddings placed on that same board. And today you see the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. And I would just say, before I toss it, the King and Queen consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. So tomorrow, Charles and Camilla, who is Queen consort, which was designated by Queen Elizabeth not that long ago, and that fraught history is well known, and we'll talk more about that in time. But they will return as King and Queen consort. So this is an enormous moment for the family, and a moment of grief and a moment of looking forward as well, but mostly a moment of family grief.
Just an update coming from the BBC right now that the Prime Minister is expected to make a statement. The last few moments, staff had carried a podium onto Downing Street after Buckingham Palace announced the news of the Queen's death. The Union flags, as we just noted, have been lowered to half-mast, and the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, is expected to speak shortly. All of this, as you mentioned, there will be serious protocol that has been put in place for quite some time, Martha. The UK will enter a 12-day period of national mourning. The Queen's body will be taken to lie in state in Parliament's Westminster Hall until her funeral takes place. These preparations, Martha, had been underway for a long time. And wow, has she proved anyone wrong who thought she might have passed earlier. 96 years old. What a life she lived, Martha.
Yeah, she had great genes. Her mother lived to be 103. Her father, of course, died at a young age. But she was in very good shape. Until not that long ago, she was still riding horses and driving and going out for walks with her dogs. She's clearly had a difficult past year, I would say. I think that post-COVID, which she had in the spring, we saw a drop in her weight. She looked much more frail, I would say, after that. And I don't know how much we'll learn in time of any underlying illnesses, but these are things that really have not been discussed, other than the fact that she had mobility issues, which was clear during the Jubilee, and good days and bad days, like a lot of people in their 90s you would expect to have. But she had just an indomitable spirit and energy and optimism about the future. And she talked about that at the Jubilee, about how optimistic she was about the future. And let's face it, the United Kingdom is going through some very, very difficult times. Economically, they're in very tough straits. The pound is extraordinarily weak. All of these elements that need to be dealt with. No doubt she discussed some of this with Liz Truss the other day, the new prime minister. And I think it was probably very important to her to get that piece of business done, to meet with Truss, to give her the invitation to form a government, which is the tradition that is always in existence between the ruler, between the reigning monarch and the prime minister. So that was her real last piece of business, was giving the invitation to Liz Truss to form a government. And no doubt that is something that this prime minister will remember for the rest of her life, and feels quite deeply about the responsibility that lays in front of her right now, because she will be overseeing much of this process and how her country responds to it.
Just want to note that Speaker Nancy Pelosi here in the United States has ordered the flags at the U.S. Capitol to be flown at half-staff due to the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So all of this we have just learned in the past hour. Queen Elizabeth II has died at the age of 96. Martha, we know you're going to go get ready to cover this on your show, top of the 3 o'clock hour Eastern time, as we look live at the flag flying half-staff there at Buckingham Palace in London. John?
Yeah, and we know that, as you said, Nancy Pelosi has ordered the flag at the Capitol building flown at half-staff. We have not yet heard from the White House as to whether or not the flag will fly at half-staff there. I imagine it will, and whether the president will issue an order to have the flag flown at half-staff at federal buildings around the nation. Fox News contributor, National Review Institute fellow Douglas Murray joins us now. And Douglas, this is a moment that obviously was going to be inevitable because everyone dies at some point. Queen Elizabeth II delayed this as much as she possibly could. But your thoughts at the news of the passing of the Queen at the age of 96?
Yes, I mean, for everybody, I think, around the world, but especially in Great Britain, it's a moment of unbelievable sadness and a moment of extraordinary transition in the life of the nation. For most of us, for our entire lives, we've known only the reign of Elizabeth II. It's important for people to understand, as I think mentioned earlier in the hour, that she stands above politics. The monarch reigns over politics and over the nation. And at great times of national crisis, it's the Queen, the monarch, that we looked to. And you just think recently with the COVID crisis, it was the Queen and her reassurances to the nation that really were what people wanted to hear. Of course, now, the monarchy is an extraordinary institution. Queen Elizabeth II was one of its greatest exponents, one of its greatest defenders, one of its greatest emblems. But the monarchy continues, the crown continues, and of course, we now have a new king, King Charles. This is an extraordinary transition. There will be a deep feeling of public mourning in the UK and I think around the world, and not just for the Queen herself, but also for what she represented and what she represents still. Devotion to country, devotion to other people, stoicism, courage in the face of adversity. A feeling of selflessness, let's say, of putting others first, putting the country first, most of all. And I think many people around the world will recognize in those virtues something which have passed to a great extent, but which mean an enormous amount to many of us still. So yes, it's a very significant time in the life of the nation.
World leaders are, comments from world leaders following her death are pouring in from around the world. French President Emmanuel Macron just releasing a statement saying Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II embodied the British nation's continuity and unity for over 70 years. I remember her as a friend of France, a kind-hearted queen who has left a lasting impression on her country and her century. U.S. President Bill Clinton just putting out a statement saying, quote, "My thoughts and prayers are with the royal family and all the people Her Majesty inspired throughout her lifetime of service." To that note, she was an inspiration to many, Douglas.
Yes, that's right. And I think many world leaders, and particularly British leaders, constantly called on her source of not just knowledge, but also wisdom. We saw just in the last couple of days, perhaps her last public duty was being with Liz Truss as the new Prime Minister and seeing the outgoing Prime Minister. And Prime Ministers in the United Kingdom in particular, but world leaders as a whole, were always acutely aware with Her Majesty that here was somebody who, her first Prime Minister was Winston Churchill. She saw her nation, indeed the world, through the worst possible times. She was the link back to that greatest generation. Remember that when Victory in Europe Day came, World War II came to an end, Her Majesty was on the balcony of Buckingham Palace with her father, the late Queen, and Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and also with Winston Churchill. Many people not only valued, as I say, her store of knowledge, but the wisdom that came from knowing that nations and peoples go through terrible times and come through them. That there are things above politics, remembering the significance of the nation, and of service to the nation. These things and much more were called upon and admired and respected, I know, by American presidents, by French presidents, by leaders around the Commonwealth and around the world. It's not going to be surprising, I think, that in the coming hours and days we're going to hear from a quite bewildering array of people, both heads of state and also just the many millions of people whose lives were touched by Queen Elizabeth, the late Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah,
we're going to hear a lot of tributes, and they'll be very well deserved.
Yeah, among them, Mitch McConnell, who just released a statement saying, "Today, all Americans stand with our great friends across the Atlantic in mourning the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The British people's loss is the entire world's loss. We Americans join our friends in prayer, in grief, and in gratitude for such a remarkable leader and such a successful reign." I mean, it's emblematic of the special relationship that the United States has with Britain, considering the storied history that we have with that country and with the monarchy going back to the middle part of the 1700s. We do know that the Prime Minister is going to be speaking at some point in the next little while. A podium has been set up out front of number 10 Downing. We were, according to London Bridge, which is the official program to run after the Queen's passing, it called for King Charles to make an address to the nation at 6 o'clock. That 6 o'clock has come and gone in the UK. Do you expect that we will hear from King Charles today, or if that won't happen until tomorrow, Douglas?
I would expect we'll hear from him fairly soon. It's going to be very important that this sense of continuity is kept in mind. You know, on the death of a monarch in the UK, they say, the Queen is dead, long live the King. And there will need to be, I think, a statement from the now King to reassure the nation. Of course, Queen Elizabeth was his mother, so he's lost his mother as well as the monarch. But I would expect that we will hear from him. I think there will be great public sympathy and support for him, and it will be very important that this transition into a very new era is done steadily and with great care, because I think a lot of people will be experiencing great shock as well as sadness at the news.
If you could stand by with us, Douglas, thank you very much for joining us as we enter a new hour here, just moments after learning of the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, dead now at the age of 96.
The fundamental concepts which have inspired both the United States and the nations of the Commonwealth are the same. As between individuals, freedom, honest dealing, tolerance and justice under the rule of law. As between independent nations, free and sincere cooperation in the search for a just and lasting peace for mankind. Let us pursue these ideals with faith and determination, so that 350 years from now, our descendants will be as proud of us as we are of our forefathers.
A young Queen Elizabeth in 1957 on her first trip across the Atlantic, the first British monarch to set foot in the same United States that waged bloody war to escape the crown's clutches so many years ago.
But on that day, as throughout her entire reign, the Queen's focus remaining on the bonds that bring our nations together and the common goal of liberty for us all.
Now just past 7 in the evening in the United Kingdom, ending a dark and rainy day, now turning into a somber night, with word in just the past half hour that England's longest-serving monarch, the world's longest-serving monarch for that matter, Queen Elizabeth, has died. Hello and welcome to the second hour of America Reports. I'm John Roberts in Washington. What an afternoon, Sandra.
Sad day indeed, John. Great to be with you. I'm Sandra Smith in New York, by the way, as world leaders continue to weigh in on the loss of Queen Elizabeth II. Ukraine's President Zelensky extending his condolences to Britain and the Commonwealth for what he calls an irreparable loss of the Queen. The palace announcing the Queen passed peacefully this afternoon at her Balmoral estate there in Scotland. The royal family gathering there throughout the day for a final goodbye to Britain's longest-serving monarch.
Crowds have been gathering all day outside Buckingham Palace, as you see the live pictures there, as news of the Queen's dire health spread. And now that her announcement of her passing has happened, we expect that more people will be gathering outside there as well. An unfamiliar moment in a nation where nobody under age 70 has ever lived without Queen Elizabeth as their king. Think of it that way.
Yeah, and just 2 days ago, the Queen meeting with the new Prime Minister, British Prime Minister Liz Truss, for what was likely the final official picture of the 96-year-old monarch.
We have got coverage throughout the hour. Greg Palcott in London is joining us. And Greg, I don't know if you have it. I trust you do. A statement from King Charles just moments ago at the moment of his passing of his mother.
Absolutely, John, Sandra, a very sad time here in the UK, a sad time around the world. And yes, just in the past, 3 or 4 minutes, we've gotten a statement from, yes, King Charles. Let me read it to you here. A statement from His Majesty the King at the time of the Queen's death. The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms, and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection which the Queen was widely held. Back to you.
Greg, the new Prime Minister is speaking now. Let's go to her live.
It was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her. She ascended the throne just after the Second World War. She championed the development of the Commonwealth from a small group of 7 countries to a family of 56 nations, spanning every continent of the world. We are now a modern, thriving, dynamic nation. Through thick and thin, Queen Elizabeth II provided us with the stability and the strength that we needed. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. Her life of service stretched beyond most of our living memories. In return, she was loved and admired by the people in the United Kingdom and all around the world. She has been a personal inspiration to me and to many Britons. Her devotion to duty is an example to us all. Earlier this week, at 96, she remained determined to carry out her duties as she appointed me as her 15th Prime Minister. Throughout her life, she's visited more than 100 countries, and she has touched the lives of millions around the world. In the difficult days ahead, we will come together with our friends across the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, and the world to celebrate her extraordinary lifetime of service. It is a day of great loss, but Queen Elizabeth II leaves a great legacy. Today, the crown passes, as it has done for more than 1,000 years, to our new monarch, our new head of state, His Majesty, King Charles III. With the King's family, we mourn the loss of his mother, and as we mourn, we must come together as a people to support him, to help him bear the awesome responsibility that he now carries for us all. We offer him our loyalty and devotion, just as his mother devoted so much to so many for so long. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished. by saying the words, "God save the King."
And of course, it was just Tuesday that she appointed the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, during a meeting at Balmoral, which is now likely to be the last photograph that we'll see of Queen Elizabeth II prior to her death. John?
Yeah, and in that photograph, I mean, she obviously appears frail. I mean, what 96-year-old wouldn't? But also at the same time, she was beaming. She looked to be in good health, and now 2 days later, she's gone. Joining us now is Bret Baier, chief political anchor and an executive editor of Special Report. Obviously, this is going to factor big in your program this evening. You know, it's extraordinary because I grew up in Canada, which is a Commonwealth country, and I've never known any other ruler other than Queen Elizabeth. And you get a sense of how long she's been on the throne, because when she ascended to the throne, Joseph Stalin was the leader of the Soviet Union and Harry Truman was president.
Yeah, it's truly amazing if you think about the reign. We talk about the longest reign for a monarch, really, across the world. You think about how she was on the throne throughout the UK's efforts, as you look at the picture of her welcoming in Prime Minister Truss and establishing her as the 15th Prime Minister to sit in that seat. But Queen Elizabeth II was on the throne as the UK rebuilt from World War II, to your point. And she was on the throne when they entered the EU and when they left the EU in Brexit. She has seen amazing things over those decades on the throne, but managed to do it in a nonpartisan way, in a way in which her feelings about partisan politics inside the UK really never were seen. She advised prime ministers, she advised privately, but we never really got a sense, unless it was put out by the royal family, exactly how she felt. You know, one of the things that is going to come in coming weeks, not right away because of this, is the Northern Ireland back and forth, the protocol in the wake of Brexit. The Irish Taoiseach, the Prime Minister there, just put out a statement saying the Queen's reign was one of historic duration, immense consequence, and a focus of respect and admiration around the world. Our world is a poorer place for her passing, but a far richer and better place as a result of her long life and enduring contribution. I didn't say it with the Irish brogue, but you can get the sense of that.
As we look there live outside Balmoral Castle, where her family rushed to be by her side, say their final goodbyes in the hours prior to her death. This statement by His Majesty the King at the time of the Queen's death, Bret, it is just absolutely beautiful when you think about, obviously, him losing his queen, but also his mother, Charles, the death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, a moment of great sadness for me and all the members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms, and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning, Charles says, and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held. You know, Bret, the New York Times just put out a photo of Buckingham Palace and a double rainbow that they're reporting shimmered across the crowds gathered outside the palace when the news of Queen Elizabeth II's death broke. After a hush, people broke out in God Save the Queen, Bret.
It's pretty telling. And those pictures, I'm sure, are going to light up different television networks throughout the UK and also on papers and broadcasts. You know, the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, saying that Queen Elizabeth II was the rock upon which the modern UK was built. Think about 70 years visiting more than 100 countries around the world and the impact that this person had. How many people around the world knew who she was? Probably more than any other single person in the world. So this will be a process of mourning for the UK, but they've been preparing for this for quite some time. Now King Charles will make his way around the UK over 4 days, we're told, and all of the pomp and circumstance will come out, in coming hours. But the big coronation for King Charles will come months later. The big funeral will come probably weeks later.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at history, the last time there was a coronation in England, it was June 3rd of 1953, and that was about 16 months after King Charles VI had died. So the coronation is something for another time, but tomorrow Charles will travel to London, where the Accession Council will meet and officially proclaim him to be the King of England. And then, as you mentioned, he will embark upon a tour where he'll go visit Scotland, he'll visit Northern Ireland, he'll make his way around the country to accept messages of condolence from the local governments there and to give a tour as the new King of England. And the Queen will lie in state at Westminster Hall. And then we will have the funeral, which will occur, I believe, on the 10th day, and then the burial on the 12th day. So when you look at what's about to unfold in London, I mean, the last thing that we can remember is the funeral of Princess Diana. This will eclipse even that.
Exponentially. I mean, obviously the emotion around Diana's death and the suddenness of it, this had been planned for, but this will, as far as the pomp and circumstance surrounding it, the preparations for it, will exponentially be bigger. And you can imagine world leaders coming from all over to express condolences and to be a part of that ceremony. It's interesting if you just look at the politics of this moment. Liz Truss takes over as Prime Minister in a time when the UK is in trouble financially. As far as energy is concerned, she had a really heavy lift as she steps into this job, having been essentially the foreign secretary in charge of foreign affairs, and now has to deal with the domestic, not only the troubles, but also handling this effectively as saying goodbye to
I should mention here, just before we go back to Sandra, we've obviously seen other funerals as well. Prince Philip last year, as well as the Queen Mother, Princess Margaret. But I mean, what I was talking about, the last big funeral was the one with so much impact would have been Princess Diana.
That's right.
And also an important note, an observation by our own Chad Pergram in his note earlier, Brett, as we were talking earlier about Queen Elizabeth was a huge study of American history, a huge study of the Constitution, starting at a very young age. And Chad is making the note that she spoke to a joint meeting of Congress, 1991, Brett, the only British monarch to do so. It was May 1991. Prince Philip sat at her side. As he has always said, all the way up until his death, he believed his role was always to support the Queen. And during that address, she spoke about the Gulf War, which the U.S., UK, and other international coalition had just entered into to liberate Kuwait after the invasion of Iraq. Elizabeth spoke about the special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom, saying, quote, "The best progress is made when Europeans and Americans act in concert." And then on the Senate floor this morning, Brett, Chad notes that Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said the Queen was, quote, "an exemplar of steady leadership." He added that Elizabeth changed the world. And Brett, as you know, Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, has ordered the flags at the Capitol to be lowered half-staff to honor the late Queen.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of reaction from lawmakers, from the administration, obviously from President Biden and the First Family. This is a figure that will obviously have impact around Washington because of her long history. She was feted at a state dinner at the White House, and Nancy Pelosi's words, over 7 decades on the throne, Her Majesty was a pillar of leadership in the global arena, a devoted friend of freedom. And that basically sums it up.
All right, Brett, thank you very, very much for joining us as we continue our coverage here. A live look outside Buckingham Palace. That is one view of the flag flying half-staff there as the crowds continue to gather and say their goodbyes to the Queen. Steve Hilton joined us top of the last hour, host of Next Revolution on Fox News. Steve, we continue to see world leaders, reaction pouring in from all corners of the globe.
You know, Sandra, it's been an amazing feeling. An hour ago, as you said, we spoke. Had lots to say about the Queen and her reign. Your producer said, could you stand by in case we hear the worst? I said, of course. But I didn't imagine that it would happen, because it's the Queen and she will just go on forever. And so it just, and I heard the news, I can tell you, I let out this howl of anguish. And it takes me to a point that many have made. Brett made it, Doug Murray, Martha made the point very well, that regardless of your views on the institution of monarchy, I've always been against the institution of monarchy. That's why I'm so proud to be an American now. But regardless of your views about that, this person, this incredible public servant, transcended all of that, because you could see that all she cared about was her country, representing her country, doing her duty, doing it with dignity through everything that happened. And so I think the grief that people will be feeling right now in the UK, around the world, is not just for the person. Of course, it's incredibly painful for anyone to lose their mother, and that was reflected in King Charles's statement. But the grief for the loss of someone who embodied so much that is good and admirable about the world we want to see and the way we want people to behave in that world, and those virtues that seem to be, in many senses, disappearing. That's why it feels so painful. That's why I think it's going to be such a huge shock around the world, because of she was so indomitable. That's a word that's been used. It just feels unbelievable that she's gone. It really does, despite the fact that, you know, with that statement that we were all reacting to earlier, we've been preparing for this news ever since her illness, you know, really roughly a year ago. People have been preparing for this, but it still feels like such a shock.
You know, Steve, looking at a statement from former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who I believe traveled to Balmoral with Liz Truss for that ceremony to meet the Queen. Wave after wave of grief is rolling across the world from Balmoral, where our thoughts are all with the royal family, and breaking far beyond this country, and breaking here in the United States as well. The flag being flown at half-staff over the Capitol. We probably would expect President Biden to announce that the flag will fly at half-staff over the White House and federal buildings as well. And Congress is going to draft and pass a bereavement statement, we're told, on Tuesday. You know, I said this to Brett, that you get a sense of just how long the Queen has been on the throne when you consider that Joseph Stalin led the Soviet Union at the time of her coronation. Harry Truman was the president here in the United States. And when you know, we're looking at Balmoral Castle now, but when we had that picture of the roof of Buckingham Palace up there, I remember not too long ago, Brian May, the guitarist from Queen, and there you see it there, up on one of those parapets during one of the many Jubilee celebrations for the Queen, playing with his famous red special guitar, God Save the Queen. And I know that you probably did this as well, Steve, but during my entire youth at elementary school, every morning we would say the Pledge of Allegiance and sing God Save the Queen.
That's exactly right. We sang God Save the Queen, and it was played, and you'd stand up, and there she was, and she just goes on. And there are so many memories as I think about and reflect on her life and in a personal sense. I mean, you just reminded me of something that I hadn't even been thinking of, which is that for the 2012 Olympics, just before I moved here to America, I was working in the Cameron administration, and I was the point person, as it were, for the opening ceremony of the London Olympics, working with Danny Boyle, who is the director, who is the creative director, and putting all of that together. And of course, the most memorable part of that whole ceremony was the opening, where the Queen was greeting Daniel Craig and his character as James Bond, and then he took her in the helicopter, and there she was. And of course, in the end, we knew it was a lookalike, parachuting in to the stadium. And I remember talking to him about that plan, and had he discussed it with the royals? Oh, you need to help me with that. And we went through this whole process, and we couldn't quite imagine that he'd be able to pull it off, and that she would agree to it. But of course she did it, because she knew how amazing that would be and how the whole world would remember that moment. And she had this fantastic sense of an understanding and a connection with people and with the country, and a sense of humor. And although she had that dignity, Martha was speaking to this earlier, you know, she had that sense of dignity and majesty about the office, but also that ability to have some fun, to relate to people, to have a sense of humor. And all these things, all these reflections and memories will be pouring out over the next few days, of course. But in the end, I think it really is. I know this is such a cliche to even say this, that when we talk about the passing of an era, she embodied so much of a particular spirit. And in the UK, that I think a lot of people will be thinking back particularly to the wartime spirit, that sense of determination and grit and resilience. She really represented that better than anyone. And I think that's why this will be felt so strongly everywhere.
Steve Hilton, thank you for sharing your heartfelt memories of the
Thanks,
Queen.
Steve.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we are joined now by Shannon Felton-Spence, a royals expert and former head of communications for the British Consulate General. Thank you very much for staying with us here. There is a brand new statement by another U.S. president, President George W. Bush, and his wife, Laura, saying, "We're honored to have known Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. She was a woman of great intellect, charm, and wit, spending time at Buckingham Palace and having tea with Her Majesty and her corgis is among our fondest memories of the presidency." Queen Elizabeth ably led England through dark moments with her confidence in her people and her vision for a brighter tomorrow. Our world benefited from her steady resolve, and we are grateful for her decades of service as sovereign. Americans in particular appreciate her strong and steadfast friendship. Laura and I join our fellow citizens in sending our heartfelt condolences to the royal family and the British people. And you are reminded that during her reign, there have been 15 prime ministers, 14 U.S. presidents, 7 Roman Catholic popes. Your memories of the Queen.
Well, first of all, you know, my deepest condolences to the King and the entire royal family and the people of Britain. This is such a time of sorrow and mourning, and I hope that they know how deeply this loss is felt in America and throughout the world. I was just in the UK for the Platinum Jubilee in June, and people were exuberant. The energy was like nothing I've ever seen. The streets of London were just full, shoulder to shoulder, of people from around the world showing up to celebrate 70 years on the throne. And I truly have never seen anything like it. She will be so deeply missed.
You know, in terms of how deeply missed she will be, you know, the sadness, obviously, that this is going to precipitate in London and beyond in the UK is just incalculable at this moment. But we have ceremonies that are coming up over the course of the next 12 days that are going to pay such tribute to this Queen that the sadness, no doubt, I think will turn to celebration at some point, will it not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, 70 years on the throne, the world's longest reigning monarch. It is something to celebrate. So they have a process for this. We will go into a period of mourning of about 10 days, and we will have the funeral. And then we have an exciting transition to look forward to. There's a new king, God save him. And, you know, this is what the crown does. The crown passes down, the crown remains.
Still waiting on an official statement from the current U.S. president as reaction continues to pour in from world leaders. Former U.S. presidents, Donald Trump also sharing his tremendous loss and sadness on the passing. He and Melania deeply saddened in a statement to learn of the loss of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Together with our family and fellow Americans, we send our sincere condolences to the royal family and the people of the UK during this time of great sorrow and grief. And you're remembered of those images of his visit to see the Queen. And this was such an important part of her reign to continue all those relationships, in particular with the United States and the many presidents during which she saw under her reign.
Absolutely. So there was a poll actually in the last couple of weeks from the Association of Marshall Scholars and Emerson College that asked Americans for the next generation, how important will the monarchy be for UK-US ties? And remarkably, the poll found that 64% of Americans between the ages of 18 and 34 think that for the next generation, the monarchy will be as important or even more important than it is now. And that is a testament to her legacy. She has watched Western European monarchs fall and lose significance her entire reign. And to see that the special relationship is that strong, that we know that the monarchy will be important to our alliance and our friendship, it's just remarkable.
Yeah, Shannon, we're just getting a response from former President Obama and Michelle Obama saying from the day of her coronation 70 years ago, the first one ever televised to this moment, there's countless tributes being posted online in her honor. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth has captivated the world. Today, Michelle and I join so many others who are celebrating her life and mourning her passing. You know, it is rather extraordinary when you think of the violent history that this nation had with the British monarchy so many years ago, how beloved a British monarch actually became.
Absolutely. Well, I was just thinking when you were speaking with Steve about singing the British national anthem, God Save the Queen, at school every day. And I'm reminded that actually Our Country 'Tis of Thee is the same tune of God Save the Queen. We are bound to each other in friendship and in history and in democratic values. And that's just a fact.
Much will be made about who made it there to say their goodbyes. Of course, we kept track of her children, her grandchildren who flew to be by her side. We saw that happening earlier today. Obviously, William and Harry making their way there. We quickly learned, while we thought that Meghan had been also along with Harry, that she was not. But her family was so important to her, and no one will really ever know. I'm sure many stories will be told about how she tried to mend that relationship towards the end with Harry and Meghan distancing themselves from their family.
I don't think that there's much to be made of Meghan originally announcing that she was going to Balmoral and then saying that she wasn't. I actually just think that Kate Middleton did not go, and so they understood that it was the proper thing to do to just send the boys. But listen, it's been a rough couple years for the Queen with the Duke of Edinburgh passing last year, the pandemic, Harry and Meghan leaving. It's been a very high-stress time for the whole world, but even inside the palace walls, just in her own family, it's been quite difficult.
You know, Shannon, we saw during the Silver Jubilee, or the Platinum Jubilee, rather, back in June, a queen who at sometimes was able to attend the various ceremonies, such as being on the balcony there with her family, but then she had to cancel some events. But then there was a moment that really showed the fact that the Queen, for all of her perception as a very, very serious person, had an irreverent side as well. Let me just play this piece of video when the Queen suddenly showed up on television with Paddington Bear.
Thank you for having me. I do hope you're having a lovely Jubilee. Tea? Oh, yes, please. Oh, terribly sorry.
Never mind.
Oh dear. Perhaps you would like a marmalade sandwich.
Decided to open her home at Buckingham Palace to the public for the first time to generate extra funds from admission fees. And I think that's why we see images like this, why we have so many people outside paying their respects. And of course, it's been well covered as we go back to the Queen here, that she is the longest running monarch, 70 years on the throne, the oldest and longest reigning monarch in British history. In 2015, she surpassed her great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, who reigned for 63 years and 7 months. And then in 2016, Elizabeth also became the longest reigning monarch in the world with the death of a king in Thailand. And earlier this year, 2022, of course, she became the second longest reigning monarch in world history, behind 17th century French King Louis VIII, who took the throne at age 4. So apart from Elizabeth and Victoria, only 4 other monarchs in British history have reigned for 50 years or more. That's George III, Henry III, Edward III, and James VI of Scotland. It's the longest reigning monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, dying at the age of 96. Of course, this was something that was anticipated. Her family had joined her in Scotland for her final moments. But as we talked about with Priscilla, one of our producers there, in our Washington News Bureau, this is obviously still an incredibly tragic moment, and everybody there is mourning the Queen. A couple notes about her birthdays I found interesting. She was born on April 21st, 1926. Think about how much happened just in her young youth in that part of the world, but it was sometimes confusing for the public to know when to celebrate. There was no anniversary fixed day for official birthday. It was either the first, second, or third Saturday in June, and was decided by the government. In Australia, her birthday was celebrated on the second Monday of June, while in Canada, it was marked on a Monday either on or before May 24th, which is Queen Victoria's birthday. Only the Queen and those closest to her celebrated her actual birthday in private gatherings. So she didn't have these big elaborate parties, I think, that we all associate with royalty. They were low-key private gatherings, and a lot of people, it depends on what part of the world you're at, celebrated her birthday on a different day. And this was noted earlier by Melissa Ratliff, who we spoke with from our Sarasota station. She was the subject of pop songs. The Beatles immortalized her with their tongue-in-cheek song, Her Majesty, calling her a pretty nice girl, though she doesn't have a lot to say. I'd sing it for you, but you don't want to hear that. The brief song, sung by Paul McCartney and was recorded in 1969, appeared at the end of the Abbey Road album. Of course, that's the historical one with them crossing, I guess you could say, the crosswalk on the cover of it. Other musical treatments weren't so kind. Of course, you have your punkers, the Sex Pistols, anti-monarchist God Save the Queen, released right before her silver jubilee in 1977, was banned on British television. So both all sides of the rock genre, from pop to punk, she was covered by multiple artists. And it's such a good note as we bring the Queen back up here. And again, you're watching our coverage on Local News Live. Queen Elizabeth II dying at the age of 96. Her and her husband, Prince Philip, enjoyed a stable relationship for more than 70 years. That is such an incredible note, and it just blows my mind that they were able to, I think we all think that, stand each other for so long, 70 years. What an incredible relationship. Mike, I'm going to have ask for your help here, helping me pull up Nick on one of our screens. I'm going to be joined by Nick Lawton, one of our co-anchors here on Local News Live, in just a second. He is going over some of the social media reaction, some of the tweets, and just different world leaders that are giving us reaction here about Queen Elizabeth as she died at the age of 96. Queen Elizabeth II passing away. Also known as a great mimicker, often gave the impression of a serious demeanor. That might be because she had a poker face, but those who knew her described her as having a mischievous sense of humor and a talent for mimicry in private company. Rowan Williams, the Archbishop of Canterbury, has said the Queen could be extremely funny in private, and not everybody appreciates how funny she could be. And Bishop Michael Mann, the monarch's domestic chaplain, once said the Queen is intimidating. The Concorde landing is one of the funniest things you could see. That's one to look up on YouTube afterwards. Ian Palsy, the Northern Irish clergyman and politician, also noted Elizabeth was a great musician. She had a really good voice and was a great mimicker of him. So a woman of many talents. Okay. So we've gone over the Queen, some of those fun stories. We spoke with a couple of our great contributors, Priscilla Huff, one of our producers out there in Washington, D.C., who actually covered the Queen as a photographer. We talked to Melissa Ratliff, WWSB, Sarasota, Florida. I'm going to go ahead and bring in one of my co-hosts, Nick Lawton here. Nick has been going over the internet, looking at some of the reactions. We brought you now King Charles' reaction a little bit ago on, of course, this tragic day. Queen Elizabeth II died at the age of 96. Nick, thanks for joining me from Studio B. Please go ahead. What are you seeing on social media? What is some of the reaction here that you're seeing?
Ryan, Queen Elizabeth II was someone who meant a great deal to people, not just in her home nation, but to everyone all around the world. We're seeing so much reaction coming in from all of this. Now, before to show you the tweet that was sent out from the royal family, specifically the tweet going, quote, "The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and Queen consort will remain at London tomorrow." We've been seeing plenty of different statements from all around the nation that we've been gathering for you. Not just me, but many of our great TV, many of our local News Live producers and anchors have been seeing things from all over. This is from the President of Ireland, who tweeted a picture of him standing next to Queen Elizabeth II, paying tribute to sharing the floor with the monarch. We've also got a tweet here from the UN Secretary General, tweeting, quote, "I am deeply saddened at the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, admired worldwide for her leadership and devotion. She was a good friend to the UN and a reassuring presence through decades of change." Many people will recognize the next person who's already sent out this, from Vladimir Zelensky, saying, quote, "It is with deep sadness that we learned of the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. On behalf of the Ukrainian people, we extend sincere condolences to the royal family, the entire United Kingdom, and the Commonwealth over this irreparable loss." And of course, England, the United Kingdom, being well known for their many football teams, one of them being Manchester United, tweeting out their own statement saying Manchester United shares the sorrow of the entire nation following the announcement from Buckingham Palace on the passing of Her Royal Highness the Queen Elizabeth II, even showing an older picture of the Queen hoisting the trophy right there. A proud moment for the team, for the nation. It was well known that Queen Elizabeth enjoyed her sport as well. We've got also statements coming in from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who's putting out his own statements as well. We've also got one from the now former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who just exceeded his power to the next Prime Minister this week. But he tweeted out a statement saying, quote, "This is our country's saddest days." And he tweeted that entire statement that anyone can find on the Prime Minister's Twitter there. But of course, here at home, it wasn't just the United Kingdom or all these other nations under the United Kingdom or the United Nations tweeting out their support as well. So many American lives were touched by the Queen as well. So we're about to actually, Ryan, I'm going to put through some more quotes that we're now finding from American lawmakers that we're going to go ahead and show you right now. The first that I found so far coming from former President Bill Clinton, who wrote, "Hillary and I mourn the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and we join with people across the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth and all around the world in giving thanks for her extraordinary life." And that was only the first paragraph of the former president's statement. He released a much longer one you can find on his Twitter as well. And as we continue to go down the list, I'm finding Senator Chuck Grassley tweeted out, "Queen Elizabeth II was such a great queen. She loved the British people and was deeply involved in everything a queen must do. I appreciate all she's done for the people of Great Britain. She's a symbol for the whole world on decency and humanity. God bless the royal family." We also have a statement from Senator Mitch McConnell, the Republican Senate Minority Leader, who tweeted out saying, "Today, all Americans stand with our great friends across the Atlantic in mourning the monumental loss of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Elaine and I extend our deepest sympathies to the royal family and to the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth." We also have a statement from U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn, who tweeted out, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II will be remembered as a trailblazer and fearless world leader. An ally to the United States, her remarkable tenure spanned the service of 14 U.S. presidents. Chuck and I extend our deepest condolences to the royal family and people of the UK. And there's a reason I saved that latest tweet for last there, Ryan, because that one line truly stands out. Her tenure spanned the tenures of 14 American presidents. Wow. 14 different American presidents met Queen Elizabeth when traveling abroad to the United Kingdom. When you put that kind of life, that kind of career, that kind of reign into context, and you see the length and breadth of it, it's absolutely mind-boggling.
The longest reigning monarch died today at the age of 96. Nick, great job there, going over all those reactions from different politicians and important cultural figures across the planet. Obviously, everybody. There's a large number of people that are weighing in here, so great work there. I want to get your perspective, Nick. You've spent some time over in the UK. And you have connections there. I guess, what are your thoughts on this day after being somebody that is interested in the monarchy, in just that part of the world? What are you thinking, and are you surprised by just the outpouring of support for the Queen?
I truly am not, if I'm being honest with you. In all the in the times I've spent with amongst the English people, it's been kind of conflicting responses from the majority of them. You know, when you first go there as an American tourist, you're bewildered by the idea of a monarchy. You're charmed by it. There's a reason why so many Americans remain to this day charmed to the level of obsessed with the royal family, because it's something we don't have. It's something we don't typically see. So anytime there's a royal baby being born or a royal wedding occurring, as a matter of fact, you know, in my short lifetime, one of the first major news events that I remember as a child was the death of Princess Diana. And so when you think about how hard a death like this hits not only the nation of England, but America and everyone around the world, there is a gravitas to it. Even though when you speak to many English people, they'll often remark that, yes, there is a separation. We understand that the royal family is somewhat more of a figurehead than in actual power, at least in this modern age, in this day and age, but it's still a part of them. It's part of their national heritage. It's part of who they are. And oftentimes when something like this occurs, it can be a great unifier for a lot of people to come out, as you're seeing right there outside Buckingham Palace, and showing their support for the death of the Queen. You can't even imagine how many people amassing in that court, how many generations have lived under Queen Elizabeth. You have entire generations of English citizens now who have never known anything other than Queen Elizabeth, and this will be the first time they've ever known a king when Prince Charles is officially coronated. And we haven't even had to think about the line of succession. I know we've talked about it frequently in the media, and we have thought about it, but then it becomes an afterthought because we always just assume that Queen Elizabeth is going to be there. And for many of us, we knew this day would be coming, but we never thought it was going to be today. So it's obviously a very sad day in England, a conflicting day for many of the English as well, who are remained apathetic of the royal family. They might need to hear something from Prince Charles, who will soon become King Charles. And as it was previously mentioned, you know, King Charles, when he becomes king, he might want to approach things differently than his mother did. He might try to reach the people in new ways to try to cut through some of that apathy that clearly they do see amongst their nation. So only time will tell, once Charles becomes coronated and becomes king, what direction he'll want to take the royal family in, what direction he'll want to take the crown and the throne in, because they're going to be his.
And Nick, that was comparable to what Priscilla Huff, who is one of our producers in Washington, D.C., as well as Melissa Ratliff, who is a digital content producer for WWSB in Sarasota, Florida. Both of them have spent time covering the Queen with Melissa. She is well known on TikTok as being an expert in this field. We had her on earlier. And if you're watching this now live coverage of the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, you're more than welcome to go back and you can rewatch our interview with Melissa. And then, of course, you can go back and rewatch our interview with Priscilla Huff, one of our producers in Washington, D.C., who covered the Queen as a photojournalist. Nick, I'm going to keep you on here for just a few more moments. We're waiting for a statement, and I think President Biden has made one. We'll get that up in just maybe a couple of minutes here. And after we do that, we'll break from our coverage. But first, just want to get any other thoughts from you. You know, you spent some time here, Buckingham Palace. Well, I guess that area right there, can you describe what's it like to be in that spot? Obviously, so much history there. And then everybody coming to honor the Queen. It really is a powerful moment, probably right there at Buckingham Palace, where we see it really looks like thousands of people now are gathering.
The powerful is the right word for Ryan, because, you know, when you're an American tourist and you're going around to see Windsor Castle or Buckingham Palace or Westminster Abbey or all of these different buildings that we never see, the styles of the architecture that we never see, there is, as I said earlier, just a bit more gravitas. There's a sense of weight in the air when you stand back and consider the context of all the history that all of this leads up to. And the difference in that culture is what creates the fascination for so many Americans. You want to be outside Buckingham Palace. You want to see the royal guards in the red uniforms and the tall black fuzzy hats, because you don't see that in America. And when you see that out there and you're actually standing there and you feel the weight of the history, it can be a very humbling moment. It can be a very silencing moment, because you stand there and consider everything that has transpired long before you were alive, long before your parents were alive, long before your grandparents and great-grandparents were alive. When you consider the breadth of English history and the fact that the United States, we're not even a full 300 years old yet. There are brick walls in England that are older than our country right now. And which is why when you touch on the conflicting thoughts of the royal family and of the Queen herself, and when we touch on that apathy once again, but when you see how entwined it is in your culture, in the way you view your country and the way you view yourself as a member of that nation, you can't help but feel connected. And it's up to you to express how you process that connection and how you process where you go in the future. It's very odd to talk about moments like these, Ryan, because we all live through historic moments, pins in time that we see and we understand how big this moment is, and it's almost like we don't even know how to react. We don't know how to process. We don't know how to move forward or what the world is going to be like. You know, Ryan, for yours and my generations, we can pick up several. We can think of, well, COVID-19 most recently, but we can think of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. We can think of those moments in history, who we were before, who we were after, and what we thought during. It's almost like we can remember exactly where we were when those moments happened. And that may very well, today may very well be a day like that.
Yeah, I think most would agree with that. A lot of people there over in England, even people over here, remember where they were when they found out this news, unfortunate news, that Queen Elizabeth II has died at the age of 96, the longest reigning monarch over there, dying at the age of 96. Nick, thank you so much for your information there, your perspective, and of course, you're sharing the reaction from different world leaders. We appreciate that. Before we end our coverage here, we want to show you at least, there we go, President Biden. Great job to our crew getting that up. Here's a statement from the president saying, quote, "In a world of constant change, she was a steadying presence and a source of comfort and pride for generations of Britons, including many who may have never known their country without her." That from President Biden just a few moments ago. I'm just going to read while we keep this up here. And that's the most important part of his statement. I want to read one more note, though, where he says, "In the years ahead, we look forward to continuing a close friendship with the King and the Queen consort. Today, the thoughts and prayers of people all across the U.S. are with the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth in their grief. Her legacy will loom large in the pages of British history and in the story of our world." President Biden commenting on the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. Well, that'll wrap up our coverage. We appreciate you tuning in here to Local News Live. I'm Brian Pierce, Tia Goodwin, and Mike Bell.
Personal ones, and you see this crowd gathering outside Buckingham Palace. For the most part, people who never got to know her personally, but they loved and adored this queen.
I think that, over the years, she just touched everyone's heart, going back to the war and how as a young girl, as someone said earlier, she wouldn't move away to Canada or anywhere. None of the royal family would. Just going through everything that they've been through, over these 70 years, and to be thrust into this at 25 years young and told you're going to be queen. She's just done an incredible job. And I think, the nation's lost a grandmother.
Chef, you mentioned what she has been through, and she has been through so much, but who wouldn't? I mean, when you're on the throne for 70 years, you tend to go through a lot. But she lost the love of her life, Philip, in April of last year. And could it be said, and was it your perception, that to some degree she lived the last 16 months of her life with a broken heart?
I think that, the loss of Prince Philip, who'd been by her side for so long, was a major loss to the Queen, and absolutely. And I think that, she had her royal corgis. She loved those corgis, and to have the corgis by her side, but it was never Prince Philip. And, just thinking back now to the days when she was dancing with Prince Philip at Balmoral Castle, the big smiles and beams on both their faces, I think that, she started deteriorating after Prince Philip died.
An incredible love story, those two, and it started so young. And she has gone on the record over the years saying when their eyes first met, she just knew. She knew that Philip was the one for her, and she settled on him, and they lived a very long, beautiful love story and life together. Chef, we really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing your memories.
Also interesting to note, for so many of us that know and have grown up with some of the newer generation of royals, including Kate Middleton, she is so loved by that country, John. And the Queen's biographer, Sally Bedell Smith, speaking today, telling People magazine that Kate Middleton has modeled herself after the Queen. The Duchess is 40 years old. She says she's observed the monarch as she prepares to take on her future role of queen consort. The biographer saying Catherine has learned by observing. She knows what resonates. She will have absorbed a lot from this queen. And I think we've all witnessed a very special relationship between those two as well.
There's no question. The chef, Darren McGrady, kept mentioning her corgis. She, over the course of her monarchy, owned more than 30 corgis and dorgies as well, which is a variation of the corgi, all going back to the lineage of her first corgi, Susan, who was given to her on her 18th birthday in 1944. Let's rewind the clock for a second here. Let's go back to June 3rd, 1953 in Movie Tone News. Watch here.
Queen Elizabeth, accompanied by the Duke of Edinburgh, left Buckingham Palace to be crowned sovereign of Great Britain and its far-spread Commonwealth and Empire. A gilded coach escorted by Her Majesty's household guards transported the royal pair to Westminster Abbey. And as the procession made its way through the history-hallowed streets of London, a loyal people roared out their acclaim.
All right, some memories from 70 years ago now. It's amazing that time has gone by so quickly for all of us. I remember as a boy singing God Save the Queen, and now bidding farewell to Queen Elizabeth.
A queen, a grandmother, a mother, a leader to many. She will be missed, John, and our prayers, our thoughts with her family as they grieve the loss of Queen Elizabeth II.
And a lot more to come over the course of the next 12 days.
Indeed. Well. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Sandra Smith.
And I'm John Roberts. We'll see you again tomorrow. The Story with Martha starts right now.